What if madness was not the end, but the beginning? In the autumn of 1913, one of the most brilliant minds of the modern age began to unravel. Carl Gustav Jung, doctor, professor, heir to Freud's throne, started seeing visions he could not control. He saw rivers of blood spreading across the continent. He saw corpses floating through darkened streets. He saw Europe drowning in chaos. Day after day, night after night, these images haunted him. He asked himself, am I becoming psychotic? Am I losing everything I have built my life upon? But within a year, the First World War began. The rivers of blood were real. The chaos he saw inside himself had spilled into history. To his colleagues, Jung remained a man of science. But in private, he became something else, a prophet of the psyche. He did not flee from his madness. He descended into it. This was the birth of a secret manuscript, a book unlike any other in modern psychology, a book Jung himself called the foundation of his life's work. This is the story of the Red Book, the hidden diary of a man wrestling with his soul and discovering the mythic depths of the human mind. Before the visions came, there was a fracture. Carl Jung was not just another psychiatrist. He was the chosen heir of Sigmund Freud. Freud called Jung his crown prince. The young Swiss doctor was meant to carry the torch of psychoanalysis into the future. Together, they traveled, lectured, and exchanged hundreds of letters. For a time, it seemed unshakable, a union of father and son. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Freud saw the unconscious as little more than a dark cellar of repressed sexuality and childhood trauma. Jung saw something larger, a vast spiritual reality, a collective psyche that stretched far beyond personal experience. To Freud, dreams were disguised wish fulfillments. To Jung, they were revelations, messages from a deeper world. The two men argued, their letters turned sharp, their friendship bitter. In 1913, the break finally came. For Jung, it was not just the loss of a friend, it was the loss of a father. He later admitted that the split with Freud was like a death. The man who had given him recognition, purpose, and a place in the world was gone. And so Jung stood alone, a man at the height of his career, but stripped of his foundation. In his own words, I was menaced by a psychosis. It was as if a shattering blow had torn my life into two. In the silence that followed, Jung began to hear the voices of the deep. He realized that if he could no longer lean on Freud's authority, he would have to face the source of truth within himself. But that truth did not come gently. It came as visions. It came as madness. It came as the Red Book. After the break with Freud, Jung felt himself standing at the edge of madness. Most men would have turned away. Most men would have drowned the visions with work, distraction, or silence. But Jung made another choice. He decided to descend. At night, when his family slept, Jung entered his study. He closed the door, lit a lamp, and opened a small black notebook. There, he wrote down everything that came to him. Images, voices, dreams, strange conversations with figures he did not understand. These journals became known as the Black Books. The visions were relentless. He saw rivers of blood swallowing Europe. He saw corpses floating through streets. He saw fire consuming cities, towers collapsing, nations in ruins. It was as if the world itself was dying inside him. At first, he feared he was going insane. He asked himself, what if I am no longer a doctor, but a patient? What if I am writing the story of my own collapse? But then, in 1914, war erupted. The visions he had suffered in silence now unfolded across the continent. The rivers of blood were not only his nightmare, they were history itself. Jung began to understand. These images were not merely personal. They belonged to something deeper, something vast, the collective unconscious. He was witnessing the shadow of an entire civilization. Still, the visions did not stop. A great serpent slithered before him, speaking of transformation and death. Prophets and wanderers appeared, dressed in symbols older than memory. He met figures who seemed alive, independent, yet somehow part of his own soul. And Jung did not dismiss them. He spoke to them. He argued with them. He allowed them to lead him into the depths. This was no longer science. It was initiation. It was as if the ancient world had returned, and Jung had been chosen to carry its burden. But the black notebooks were too small. The visions pressed outward, demanding more. He needed a larger vessel, something that could contain both words and images. A manuscript worthy of the madness, worthy of the revelations. That vessel would become the Red Book. The black books were only the beginning. In 1914, Jung commissioned a massive red leather folio, a book unlike anything the modern world had seen. It was large, heavy, and blank. He called it Liber Novus, the new book. We know it today as the Red Book. Into its pages, Jung began to pour the visions of his descent. He did not write in the quick scrawl of a doctor. He painted, he illuminated, he copied his words in careful Gothic script, as if each sentence were a sacred text. The Red Book was not a diary. It was a revelation, a modern gospel of the unconscious. Jung filled it with dialogues between himself and the strange figures who emerged from the depths. Prophets, serpents, wise guides, the Anima, the shadow. Each vision became both story and scripture, both dream and philosophy. But he did more than record. He transformed. He drew mandalas, radiant circles that seemed to rise out of chaos, symbols of wholeness. He painted mythic landscapes, gods and monsters, deserts and flames. Each image was a fragment of his soul given shape and color. For Jung, this was not art for art's sake. It was an act of survival. He later confessed, "The years when I pursued the inner images were the most important of my life. Everything else is derived from them." In the Red Book, the foundations of his psychology were laid down. The archetypes, the collective unconscious, the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. All of it was born here in this strange illuminated manuscript, crafted in solitude while the world outside burned in war. But there was a cost. Jung worked on the book for years, sometimes daily, sometimes in bursts, always with the fear that he was walking the line between genius and madness. The book was never finished. It remained his secret scripture, hidden from the world. The Red Book was Jung's private descent into myth, but its lessons were not only for him, they were for every man who dares to face the abyss within. And in those pages, archetypal figures began to appear, companions, teachers, and demons who would challenge Jung to the core, figures that would guide him and test him, figures we will meet in the next chapter. From the Red Book's illuminated pages rise voices. They are not Jung's alone. They are figures from the depths, mythic, symbolic, timeless. First came Salome, the blind maiden. To Jung, she embodied the soul itself, the anima, the hidden feminine within every man. She tempted, she spoke, she revealed truths he did not want to hear. Jung realized he was not only meeting a character, he was confronting a part of himself. Then came Elijah, the prophet, the wise old man, and behind him another presence began to take form, Philemon. Philemon became Jung's inner teacher, his spiritual guide. He taught Jung that the images were not mere fantasies but living realities of the psyche. Jung later said, "Philemon represented a force greater than my conscious self. He taught me the objectivity of the psyche." To modern ears, this may sound like madness, but Jung did not retreat from these encounters. He entered into dialogue with them. He listened. He argued. He let them lead him further into mystery. This was the practice he called active imagination. It is simple, but dangerous. One closes the eyes, allows images to emerge, and then, instead of pushing them away, steps into them. One speaks with the figures, asks them questions, learns from them. It is a conversation with the unconscious, a bridge between waking life and the dream world. Through this practice, Jung discovered that the psyche is not a blank page, nor a machine of instincts, but a theater of living symbols. A man may think he is one, but inside he is many. And in Jung's descent, these many voices began to reveal the great architecture of the soul, the Anima, the wise old man, the shadow, the trickster, the self, archetypes, the eternal patterns of human experience. And it was here in the Red Book that Jung encountered them for the first time. Jung's descent into the unconscious was not a collapse, it was an initiation. In the Red Book, he recorded not the end of his sanity, but the beginning of a new vision of the human mind, a vision in which dreams, fantasies, and inner figures are not meaningless illusions, but the raw material of transformation. For years, he labored in secrecy. The world saw a respected psychiatrist, but behind closed doors, Jung was a man walking between worlds, doctor by day, visionary by night. He later confessed, "The years when I pursued the inner images were the most important time of my life. Everything else is derived from them." The Red Book was his gospel of the unconscious. It was his private scripture, his dialogue with the depths, his map of the underworld. And though he feared the world would see him as insane, the truths he found there became the foundation of analytical psychology itself. But what exactly did Jung discover in those depths? What did the figures reveal to him? And how can their messages guide us a century later? In the next chapter, we will enter the mythic landscapes of the Red Book. We will meet Salome, Elijah, Philemon, and uncover the archetypal forces that live in every human soul. The descent has begun. Now, the encounters await.